Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have four words that want to share with you that are going to hopefully spark your creativity and your thoughts. Imagine for a moment. Okay, when you hear those, imagine for a moment. There's so many places that you can go. Our guest today has actually filled in some of those blanks for us from a business perspective. So I'm going to read this and then I'm going to introduce who it is, keep you in suspense for another minute. So imagine for a moment you're more effective in leading your team, reaching your customers, and generating business. Imagine for a moment your business is transforming faster than you imagined. Who wouldn't want that? And imagine for a moment you're more successful than you dreamed possible. So those are some of the things that we're going to unpack today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Jennifer Ott from Jennifer Ott Consulting. How are you?
I am doing phenomenal. How are you?
Excellent. I am so stoked. I love those words that I found in your website, and it caught me like off guard because when I heard "imagine for a moment," it kind of took me back to when I was a kid, and for some odd reason we eliminate that, like let's pretend. Those are my where I love say, hey, let's pretend, those, that kind of fun stuff. So before we jump into that, Jennifer, tell me what is going on at Jennifer Ott Consulting these days.
Wow, what isn't going on, right? Um, so, what's going on at Jennifer Consulting is essentially I am really loving and embracing the opportunity to raise people up and be more successful. I spend a lot of time in developing leaders and doing leadership coaching development. And I also am really loving helping some of my clients in developing more effective marketing strategy and branding. And I'm doing lots of fun stuff like this, public speaking, and sort of working to reach individuals to help them feel more motivated, more centered, more focused, and really accelerating their ability to be more successful.
That's awesome. And on top of it, I'm using a word that I can say I've never used on my podcast before,
Oh,
chief SaaS officer. So you
yes.
wanted that. So I'm like, man, I haven't heard sass since my grandma would say, don't sass me. Right. So it's like fantastic. I love that word. So I don't know why, but we're going back to our childhoods today. So, but thank you so much for hanging out with us. You talked about leadership, you talked about marketing. There's so much stuff that I want to unpack with you today. So, again, thanks for being here. I kind of want to jump back and start with something that we love to talk about on the show, because there's a lot of people, Jennifer, that are listening that, they have the entrepreneurial spirit. They don't know what to do with that. So I was interested to see that you worked for some pretty big name companies, Associated Bank, GE, cystic fibrosis. You've been involved in corporate America. And then you took this jump into doing this on your own. So sometimes I chat with people and they, have taken years and years. Maybe they did a side hustle for a while. They planned it out. They had every little nook and cranny figured out. And then I have people that just one day said, that's it, I'm done. And, they start their business. So walk us through what your journey was like, Jennifer, from corporate America to owning your own business. People love to hear about this stuff.
Well, that's great to hear because I love talking about it. And hopefully, my journey will serve as inspiration for a few folks. I started my career about 150 years ago,
Holy
and
cow. You
right, I
look
look
good
really good
then
for
for
my age, right?
160 something. You look pretty darn good, I gotta say.
It feels like 150 sometimes, but no. I really feel like the whole nature of my career and the path that I've taken has been very serendipitous, right? The kind of the things that were meant to happen at the time happened, and I think part of what makes those of us who consider ourselves entrepreneurs different than other people is when we see those opportunities, we identify them, and we take advantage of them. And so I think oftentimes it's really the mindset that we have. I started my career in nonprofit, as you mentioned, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation,
Hmm.
and it took a very evolutionary path. I worked in consumer marketing and consumer packaged goods. I worked in agency world, healthcare, finance, compliance, lots of different areas. And the underlying themes have always been related to developing others and really cultivating a particular mindset. Much of marketing is really helping people see your point of view, right? You
Okay.
want people to you want to encourage people to take an action, to do something, and that also is something that we formulate as leaders. We want to motivate people to take an action. And so as my career grew, and my path to leadership sort of you know continued on, I really started to identify the things that got me out of bed in the morning, the things that I felt passionately about, the things that really, at the end of the day, stimulated that sense of accomplishment, that sense of satisfaction, that joy. And COVID and all things in the financial world impacted, I think, obviously a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And when I was at Associated Bank, which was my most previous role, there were just circumstances that led to some folks leaving the organization, and they had to make some hard decisions. And one of those decisions was folks in leadership positions like my own, had to part company with the company, and I can't speak more highly of the organization. They did a wonderful job taking care of those of us who they, had to eliminate positions and so on.
Sure.
But what it really did for me was create such a joyous opportunity. And my husband and I had this chat about what am I going to do, right? So am I going to go and get another full-time position? Really, an executive leadership position is where I was at in my
Hmm.
career,
Sure.
or do I really want to take the leap? And I said, really, the only way for me to do what I feel most passionately about every day, the things that really fuel my passion every day, are what I want to do every day. And the only way
Hmm.
to do that is for me to start working for myself.
Sure.
And so I made that choice. And so here I am.
Wow. And that's, you know, that you bring up such a good point. I'm trying to write it down as you're saying. I mean, for if you're listening and you're not doing what you love to do, there are options. And I'm not here to say, tomorrow quit your job and then figure something out. No, but there's a difference between just going through the motions and actually being able to enjoy owning your own company, working for yourself. And I think it starts, like you said, Jennifer, I read between the lines, and it starts by digging a little bit deeper within yourself, because it is pretty easy to put it on cruise control. And we talk a lot about, there's plenty of days for me where I drive by Walmart and I'm like super envious of the cart boy, because, all the guy's got to do is move carts around in the parking lot. That looks really appealing on certain days, right? But the vast majority of the days, I call those speed bumps. But for me, the vast majority of my days, I absolutely love what I do. And if people aren't in that, I love what I do, that's the people we're talking to. And I try so hard to just encourage people to think outside your comfort zone, look outside what's going on in your immediate. For you, were you like, did you think that eventually someday you would be owning your own business, or was it just kind of moving up the ladder in corporate America, and that was working for you, and then all of a sudden it just didn't work? Or do you remember that transition for yourself?
Yes. So a couple of things kind of impacted the decision. And this is not the first time that I've worked on my own.
Okay.
So in between jobs years ago, I did freelance work for about 2.5 years,
Okay.
and I loved it. And I make the distinction between freelancing and consulting because they're very different, right? When I was freelancing, it was, every project, I can do that. I can do that. Sure, I can do that. And I was chasing the dollar,
Sure.
right? and I was making money, but I can't say I was pursuing my passion, right? I was working on my own, which was wonderful, but it was a little different. And so I had that background, and I knew I was capable of working on my own because I'd done it before.
Sure.
But I really thought very long and hard about what I want to do and what I want that to look like. And so I do feel very much, and whatever people believe individually, I certainly support that. You know, it's the universe or nature, or, you know, some believe in higher power, and I don't put my beliefs on anybody else. But I believe that this transition in my life was really, you know, my higher power nudging me forward, right? This is the path you're meant to take.
Sure.
And luckily, I have an incredibly supportive network, starting with my husband. Not only did he say, "You got to do this," but he also, you know, built me an office. So I'm sitting in an office that he built for me in our home.
Did he charge you
Um,
for it or did he do it for
so,
free?
I mean, luckily he did not, which is
Yeah.
wonderful. I am doing some marketing for him in his real estate business, which is
Okay.
sort of like, you know,
Well, let's
quid pro
give him a
quo, I
shout out
guess.
for a free office. Holy cow, good job.
Right, exactly. I'm working it off. I'm working it off.
Yeah.
So, but it's really, you know, I knew that I wanted to do this,
Yeah.
and I really feel like, you know, somebody was watching over, like, ugh, just do it already,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
go
Yep.
here, you know, we're
Yep.
taking away your safety net.
Yep.
Um, and to your point, I would never say to anybody, not everybody's built to work for themselves, right? Not
Right.
everybody, the world needs people in all positions. It's
Yep.
what keeps the world turning, right? So
Yep.
not everybody's meant to work on their own. But if you have that, you know, bud inside of you, if you have that kernel
Mhm.
growing inside of you, it's on you to nurture it, right?
Yep.
It's on you to water it and feed it, and let it grow and let it evolve, and then listen to it so that you have the opportunity to really say, I can do this.
Right.
And, you know, to look at anybody and say, hey, I really think you should start your own business in the middle of a pandemic
Yeah. Right.
and a
Yeah.
downturn in
Yeah.
in
Yep.
in the economy, and, you know, Q4. Um, I would never give anybody that advice, but that's what I
Sure.
did. And so far, so good.
That's so cool. And I think that you bring up a great point again that there's this bud or a mustard seed or whatever you want to say. There's this little inkling inside of you. And I always encourage people when I run into them and we get into this conversation, I say, you know what? Let's just be real. 8 to 5 is for your current employer. But you know what? 5 to 8 at night or whatever the numbers are is immaterial, but 5 to 8 is your time. And you know what? Whether you take a course, whether you try something, I mean, there's so many different ways to kind of fan that flame to see if it's something that works. Because I know I sold my last business and it was on a Tuesday afternoon. And I'm looking at, I'm like, the guy says, so now what are you going to do? I'm like, shoot, I don't know, but the next day I started positive polarity and I just kind of, I was used to it. I was used to coaching. I was used to just starting from scratch businesses and growing them. So it comes natural. So to your point, yeah, I'm not saying that everybody has to do it this way. If you're completely content on a team working for somebody, go for it. Continue to do it. Thrive. Do a fantastic, best job possible. I just know that there's certain people listening that that's not scratching the itch, so to speak. And when it,
100%.
and
I
when
couldn't
it,
agree.
yeah, and when it doesn't scratch the itch, it's kind of like it kind of exudes like a negativity because you're not content and you're not happy with what's going on, and you're always looking around like there could be something more.
Mhm.
And it's those people that I just want to encourage to dig a little deeper, do what you did, have a sit down with somebody that you trust, and kind of unpack this stuff. And it's crazy what could potentially happen. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think it kind of transitions into your new consulting role. Fast forward the tape, because now you said you love to develop other people. Well, I mean, that's exactly what we do as coaches. I mean, that's what we do is we develop people. So, you talk about composite leadership. So tell us what, leadership is such an overused term. Everybody has leadership training, or everybody wants to develop leaders on all this. So I get that piece. I'd like to understand the composite leadership that you talk about.
Yep. So thank you. Lovely transition. Wonderful. Um, so when I started thinking about how do I want to take my passion for developing people and create a business out of it, I really thought about who needs it the most, right? And what does that look like? And where's a gap that I can fill? Because I don't want to just be part of background noise. There's something that I have felt has been missing, and that's really related to that mid-level leader.
Okay.
Those people who, are really successful in a particular role and get promoted to a leadership position, but are really not given any of the tools to really lead effectively, right? I use sales as a great example. You have somebody in your organization who is phenomenal at sales, and you say, great, I want you to manage this team of salespeople because you've been such a successful salesperson. And then they're not given the proper tools to be a leader. They're not given the opportunity to be really effective. So they end up kind of guessing
Yeah.
at how they're supposed to lead
Yeah.
and really stay focused more on that tactical aspect of more management versus leadership, and never really get an opportunity to excel or feel that sense of satisfaction. So when I
Sure.
started thinking about what I wanted to do for leadership development, I really wanted to focus in that area. Not that I don't work with all different levels of leaders, but that's really where composite leadership as a methodology was born.
Okay.
And so I created composite leadership to really focus on that mid-level leader that feels undertrained, that feels underdeveloped, and wants empowerment, doesn't really know how to grow their career, doesn't really know how to grow as a leader.
Sure.
So really, what composite leadership is I really focus in on that composite piece. Really, it's a composition or an amalgamation, which I love that word. It's a
What is
four,
it?
it's a four-star college word, amalgamation.
Oh
It's
gosh.
really a fancy way of saying it, a
Oh my
composition.
gosh, here we
I
go with
know,
the big words.
nerd.
It took like what? Well, it took 16 minutes, but thank you for, doing that. That's awesome.
I'm
I
a
forgot
word
to tell
nerd.
you, you are okay. I forgot to tell you, I'm only 3 syllables and under, okay? For me, it's not my
Fair.
listeners, it's for me, okay? So
Okay.
anyway, but I digress. Go ahead.
So essentially what it is it's a composition of really the most effective traits and skills that you need as a leader, and it's built together and combined into a leadership program, but it also then is enhanced with a modernized approach and really the skills necessary to lead in our current environment. For example, everyone knows and understands what situational leadership is, right? We talk about it all the time.
Mhm.
It's very well understood. Situational leadership was first introduced in the 70s. And so there's nothing wrong with situational leadership. There's a lot of great stuff packed in there. But leadership development, like anything else, must evolve with the times. So using that as an example, that was derived at a time or discovered at a time when we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Zoom calls. We
Sure.
didn't have a lot of the digital media that we have now.
Mhm.
And so, how do you take the kernels of these really great leadership styles or leadership trainings and put them together in a way that is most effective? I look at leadership development as something like riding a bike.
Okay.
There are absolute skills and competencies necessary to be effective. You have to be able to balance when you ride a bike.
Mhm.
You have to be able to pedal. You have to be able to do the things that physically make the bike move. As a leader, you have to have empathy. You have to own the role. You have to be willing to make the hard decisions and the hard choices. These are skills that we teach in composite leadership, so that instead of trying to find a skill or rather a style that you fit into and saying, oh, that sounds like me, I'm going to lean into those good skills,
Mhm.
we're creating a foundation of competency on which accelerated leadership ability is built. And that's essentially what composite leadership does. It sort of turns that on its head and says, these are the core things you need to develop, regardless as to what your personal style is.
Sure.
You need to be able to do these things at the end of the day.
Now, are those core pieces the same for everybody, or do they vary based because of the different styles of leadership?
So again, this is foundational. So it really applies to everybody.
Okay.
I've yet to meet an effective leader that doesn't have a great sense of accountability.
Gotcha. Sure.
And accountability is one of the things that we teach. And what does that look like? And what does that feel like? What we try to stimulate when we talk about composite leadership is an understanding that somebody's roles and responsibilities are evolving. And I use an analogy about being an architect versus a builder.
Okay.
We all start our careers as builders, right? We're laying the bricks, we're laying the foundation, we're learning how to build.
Hmm.
And then we start to learn more about why we're building what we're building, the strategies behind it, the goals that we need to achieve. And that's when you start to become more of an architect. How do I
Gotcha.
contribute to the strategy, the vision,
Sure.
those short-term and long-term goals development? And that's one of the things that we talk about as well in composite leadership is the shift in mindset from being a builder to an architect. And how do you manage both roles? Because really those mid-level leaders are fulfilling both roles.
Wow, that's so cool. So you might not have heard it, but there were a bunch of entrepreneurs that put their brakes on when you use that A word, because accountability is like, I'm cruising along and life is good. And then all of a sudden, this lady tells me about accountability. Right? I mean, that's like,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know about you. I'm going to be vulnerable and say one of the reasons that I don't work for somebody else is that exact word, because I don't like being accountable to other people. So, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. It's just me, right? So,
Mhm.
is that a difficult principle for people that go through the composite leadership training that you are coming alongside? Is that a hard piece for them to kind of wrap their brain around?
So it's a great question, and I think it harkens back to a comment that you made earlier, or rather a question that you made earlier about it varying by individual.
Hmm.
So the skill is required, I believe, of every leader, right? But what we try to do is meet people where they are. And there may be individuals who have more of a developed sense of accountability than others.
Hmm.
And so as part of the program, we do some, one-on-one work as well as group work.
Okay.
And that's where I tend to kind of get a baseline of where everybody is. Accountability can be a bit nebulous, right? There's another four-star college word for you.
But it's only three
Nerd.
syllables, so you're safe.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Um, so it can be a bit nebulous from
Yep.
the perspective in that people, you know it when you feel it, but you can't necessarily kind of describe it in your own personal sense. And so we like to give some definition around it. And at the same time, some people do struggle with being accountable to others, but one of the things that we also coach is being accountable to yourself.
Sure.
And as an entrepreneur, whether you think you've dodged the accountability bullet, you haven't. Because working for yourself, I think is probably the hardest. I'm the most difficult boss for myself, right?
Right.
I
Yep.
have higher expectations of myself than I probably would for other people. And it's funny because when I decided to go out and do this, I said for the first time, I really invested in some personal coaching of my own
Sure.
because I knew I needed a resource to bounce ideas off of to kind of help me focus.
Yep.
Because I think and I'm going back to entrepreneurship a bit, but when we decide we want to go into business for ourselves, I think what we want to do is boil the ocean, right? We want to kind of swallow up all the business
Yep.
because that's what we identify as making ourselves really successful. And the opposite is what I learned from this individual coaching and kind of this program that I wanted to go through and really, investing in myself. And so I learned to focus. really focus on what I thought was important and really what I wanted my message to be. And so developing composite leadership is really the evolution of that focus. And so when we talk about, and bringing it full circle, I swear, when we talk about accountability,
Yep.
it's about really focusing on what you want to achieve and being accountable to those results. Being accountable to a boss or to corporate goals or to a particular outcome for the organization
Yeah.
isn't a bad thing. It helps us
Sure.
focus.
Yep.
It helps
Absolutely.
develop that real focus on what we want to do. But accountability is also owning your part and your role in that and leading by example for others so that they take ownership of their responsibility.
And I think we end up, that's a great clarification. And I think we as business entrepreneurs, business owners, whatever you want to call it, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm accountable to my clients. I mean, if there's not a mutual accountability there, then the relationship isn't going to be successful. So, I think that's awesome. So, if you're listening and you are struggling with accountability or you do not have somebody, that's why people like Jennifer and I are around to be able to do that. And I always, anybody that knows me, I ask this question all the time about, I think of two of the best sports figures that I think ever lived is Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, these guys needed coaches. And I think about Phil Jackson. What could he possibly say, the coach of the Bulls? What could he possibly say to Michael Jordan? Um, and so it's the same with Tiger. I mean, the guy's got a swing coach. He's got this. I mean, he's got coaches everywhere. So when
Yep.
someone says, "Why do I need a coach?" I say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not able to say do or don't. All I can tell you is the best of the best have coaches. So if that's where you're headed, then you may want to consider that, as a potential. But I think, I mean, all the way back to what you talked about salespeople, I think that that's a huge mistake if you're great at sales to think that you're going to be a great sales manager. That's one of the worst things I think that end up happening in companies is just because you're good at sales must mean, oh my gosh, you can inspire the sales team. You'll be able to come alongside them, do ride alongs, do whatever sales professionals need. And we run a lot of DISC personality profile assessments, and it's funny because I can look at an assessment and tell you if they're going to be a good salesperson or not.
Mhm.
The makeup or the how a person is built as a sales professional is not the same makeup and building that a sales manager or a leader has. So there you can for sure have that, but it doesn't mean that a good salesperson, to your point, makes a good sales manager. So I'm just curious, when you jump, do you see a lot of that where salespeople are struggling as sales leaders, sales managers, whatever the word is? Does this composite leadership help that? Or how, if you had that struggle, what would that look like?
So there's a lot packed in that question,
Yes.
which is great. Which unfortunately now you have to listen to me talk again. But no, there's so I do see that in organizations that oftentimes those really successful salespeople are elevated to a position where leadership wants that successful salesperson to teach the rest of the sales team how they sell.
Right.
And sales training again is there are foundational aspects to being a good salesperson. But there's, you know, I think when we just see someone be good at something and tell them, great, go teach other people how to be good at that,
Right.
but you don't teach them how to teach,
Right.
we're
Yep.
forgetting about the magic, right? There's magic in each individual.
Right.
And when I work with people, so composite leadership is just one piece of leadership training that I do. And when I develop a module for a client and I kind of share an outline to make sure that we're kind of working on the same page or what have you, I oftentimes will remind them, keep in mind, this is an outline. The magic is in the presentation. The magic is in the engagement. And I think when we ask a salesperson to say, duplicate your results with a team,
Right.
you're forgetting about the magic that that individual brings to
Yep.
the interaction.
That's a great
And
point.
so what I try to do is cultivate the skills on which the magic can shine. If you have somebody who is willing to lead, that's really kind of, and that goes back to situational leadership, right? When we have gauging willingness versus ability, somebody has to be willing to take that leadership moniker, and when we have somebody who's willing to do that, that's really the first step. But then you have to give them the tools, you have to give them the ability. And whether it's sales or whether it's, any other aspect, any other vertical, if you're giving them the tools to teach,
Hmm.
if you're giving them the tools to lead, then you're giving them the ability to share their knowledge
Sure.
and to help others become good at something. And which is, coaches need to learn how to coach, right? We learned how to teach other people.
Right.
You didn't just wake up one day and be a coach.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson didn't just wake up one day and be a coach.
Right.
He learned about the game. He learned how to teach people about the game.
Yep.
And so I think that there's a foundational piece there that has to exist, regardless of what the vertical is.
Wow, that's awesome. And I write these things down about myself because, like, for instance, little well-known fact that I'm like a former state champion in racquetball. Big, not a big deal, but I
Wow.
playing. Well, I love playing. I still play and just absolutely love it. But the thing is I'm good at it, but I couldn't teach it. That's, I know my limitations. I know that I'm good at the skill, but I'm not good at telling somebody the mechanics or what I'm thinking, what I'm going through, because it's just kind of a natural skill for me,
Hmm.
and it's the same way with my book. When I wrote my Amazon #1 best-selling book, it was like, if somebody came to me and said, hey, how do I write a #1 Amazon best-selling book? I'd be like, I don't know. I'm not the right guy to ask. Now,
Right.
interestingly enough, though, I took a company from zero sales, literally $0 on day one, and we actually ended up around 10 million in annual sales when I sold it. That I can show people, and that I do on a daily basis. So I don't know
Hmm.
why I can do some but not others, but I probably could learn a bunch from your composite leadership training, because I just end up, I just think of what I did and it worked for me. And I got to remember that just because it worked for me, like, it's easy for me to jump outside my comfort zone. So when I'm training somebody or coaching them, I think, well, this is easy. Just jump outside your comfort zone. And this is like life and death to certain people. They've
Right.
never been outside their comfort zone. So it's just like, it's like, holy cow. So, I appreciate your spin on that. And I think that, the accountability, all the other chunks of composite leadership, are really solid for us. So often people do want leadership training, but they really, I just want to flip a switch and be done. And
Hmm.
I know that this is why I'll never be able to play a musical instrument, because if I can't pick up a musical instrument and do the best guitar solo or drum solo or whatever it is, if I can't just do it immediately, I don't
Hmm.
want to practice. I don't want to do that. From a composite leadership standpoint, is that a long journey for people? I mean, is it a lifetime journey? Is there like you've arrived type thing? How does that work?
So it's, again, a really fantastic question. And I will say that, leadership is evolutionary. And so keep in mind that the composite leadership journey in and of itself has a beginning and an end, right?
Okay.
But that's just one piece. And I do believe that learning and cultivating leadership skills is a never ending journey. I am constantly learning and researching and feeding that part of my brain,
Sure.
because I know that I need to do that. And great leaders never stop learning. There's always an opportunity to learn something or do something better. So the program in and of itself is it can range anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. I do it
Okay.
with groups, I do it with individuals, and it involves a series of one-on-one group interviews and workshops. And it starts with an sort of a baseline self-assessment of leadership skills and abilities, and then it ends with a professional development plan so
Gotcha.
that there's a path and a journey moving forward, because nobody wants me buzzing in their ears for the rest of their life, right? Or maybe they do, I don't know. um, but so there's a bit of a you sort of kind of graduate from this foundational piece, and then that's where I work with either an individual or an organization to work on specialty training or
Sure.
specialized training. So for an example, I work with a client that had a group of folks, really fantastic people, go through the Composite Leadership program, and after that program they said, so we really want to dig a little bit deeper into cultivating the presentation skills with this group. And I said, great. So, we're doing a training on that. And we did that. And there's also we really want to cultivate their skills in managing difficult situations.
Sure.
There's been a lot of upheaval in the world the last, 18 months. I'm not sure if you're aware.
Oh, what
Um,
is that? Well, tell me
but
about
right,
that.
what's that?
Hmm.
So, but handling kind of difficult conversations,
Sure.
not always
Sure.
conflict, but
Yep.
those kind of hard things. So that's something we're going to do a deep dive into, and change management for another organization. Once they were done with Composite Leadership, we're dealing with a lot of change in our organization. Again, shocking after
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
And can you kind of come in and do some change management training? And so yes, so composite leadership is generally it's one very big piece of a larger puzzle to cultivate our leaders and to really get them to a point where they can start to really refine and hone specialized skills that maybe one person in the group is really, really good at something, and another person is sort of a little bit further behind in that particular
Sure.
skill. And that's where we start to refine.
Wow, that's so cool. So how did you combine the leadership and the marketing piece? Because those seem to be two kind of separate pillars, and not in a bad way or a good way, but I'm just curious how you kind of bridge that gap. Is it something that you just like and are passionate about? So you're like, I want to, I want to train on that, or are there actually some connections between the leadership? I'm going to say like composite leadership and experiential marketing. Are there connections between those, or are they really separate?
So in my world, they're separate.
Okay.
And reason being is, remember when we were talking about entrepreneurs, we have to follow what gives us our joy and what
Hmm.
gives us our
Yep.
our sense of purpose.
Sure.
I really, really love developing people, and I really love and have an affinity for marketing.
Okay.
These
Gotcha.
are the two. If you look at my entire career history, it's
Sure.
those two worlds that have sort of come together, and that's where the focus of my 25 plus years of background really are. And
So it
so
went from 150 to 25 now. So what'd you do the other 125 years?
um, I I
Oh,
slept.
the
I
SAS
napped.
officer without words.
I
This is the
napped is what
first
I did.
napped.
Napped. I sassed.
There
I
you
did a
go.
lot of sass.
Chief nap officer too. Good job.
Right, right. I
Cool.
wish I could nap. I
Right?
tell my husband that all the time. I'm like, oh, I wish I could nap. I'm so tired, but I just I've never been a napper.
Yeah, me neither.
So,
Nope. Sorry, I got you sideswiped there. That,
no,
that
that's
was
okay.
on
That's
me.
okay. So for me, in the services that I provide, there's overlap when a client identifies a need.
Sure.
So I will tell you that. But experiential marketing, you specifically mentioned, and that's a really fun piece of marketing. Marketing is so many arms. I kind of look at it as marketing is the body of the octopus, and then it
Hmm.
has all these tentacles that kind of come
Sure.
off. One is digital marketing, one is
Yeah.
experiential marketing, etc. And so experiential marketing is really meant to be an immersive experience for the consumer. And so I guess the basis on which both the kind of leadership development and marketing mindset come from is similar in that we're we're motivating people to think or feel a certain thing, right? We want to motivate people to be on the same page that we are. We want to motivate someone to take action. So both are very complementary. You know, experiential marketing is more related to giving somebody an experience. So when we talk about it's event based, it's action based. When we talk about experiential marketing, it's essentially communicating to the consumer through something that they can touch, feel, taste, experience. It's more than just, watching a TV commercial. It's an immersive experience. So it is one very effective way of marketing.
Sure.
I feel very bad for experiential marketers over the course of 2020 because so much of social distancing and quarantining made it
Sure.
very, very difficult for them to do their jobs,
Yeah.
to create those experiences.
Gotcha. Well, and so, I want to make sure that because I don't want to gloss over this point. I want people that are listening to understand what just happened here because, Jennifer felt that she was good at more than one thing. And I know that a lot of times people, when they're starting their business, they want to niche down. And there's so many people that say, I remember a guy or a girl, I can't remember, somebody told me if you could only work with left-handed, blue-eyed plumbers and make a market out of that, you would rock whatever, right? And I get niching down. I get it that you want to try and do that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad, but just think about what she said. She had a passion to develop other people. Now, maybe it was from the leadership perspective, maybe it was from the marketing perspective. There's a broader topic for her that drilled down to specifics. So if you're listening and you think you can only be in one sandbox, we'll say, I'm not here to say right or wrong. She does it that way. She has more than one sandbox. I have more than one sandbox. I mean, I love helping sales professionals. I just love the selling world. But I also love the personality profiling disc and EQ and talking about personalities and building successful teams. Why can't I have both? Why does it have to be only one or the other? And again, I wanted you to make sure that you caught that because, Jennifer Ott Consulting talks about composite leadership and experiential marketing. And there's some other things that, we'll probably get into on a subsequent call. But just think about that, a marketing firm, you have this preconceived notion of that. So do people struggle with that, Jennifer, when you start talking about more than one, bucket, so to speak, or more than one thing that you're good at? Do people struggle with that, or do they kind of understand that?
So I love that question because it goes back to you just mentioned one of your passions is coaching salespeople.
Yep.
And so inherently, as entrepreneurs, we're salespeople.
Hmm.
We have to sell our services, we have to sell ourselves.
Right.
So I generally do not find it difficult to talk about the two areas that may seem very, very separate. I don't find it difficult to talk about those because more often than not, when I'm talking to a prospective client, I'm finding out what they need
Sure.
and they're gonna direct me to one or the other. And so I kind of talk about what I'm doing. And, I've gone into conversations thinking this person really is going to need some support in marketing. And then I start talking about the leadership development piece. And they're
Sure.
like, God, we really have a gap there.
Yeah.
Be able to do this. And I'm,
Yep.
yeah, of
Yep.
course.
Yep.
So it's an opportunity to talk about what the client or prospective client needs. And
Sure.
we as salespeople know that's what it's about. And
Sure.
honestly, that's where leadership development and marketing come together
Hmm.
is oftentimes we're filling a need,
Sure.
we're
Yep.
filling a gap. And
Yep.
that's what we as entrepreneurs do. You just have to be willing to let people tell you what their gap is, or
Right.
help them identify what their gap is.
Well, and that's so funny because I think about Walmart, like we talked about before, the cart boy. Now we go inside, and where else in the world can you get your tires changed and your teeth cleaned at the same time, right? At the
Right.
same place.
Not by the same people though.
Not by,
Let's hope
hopefully not by the same people, good point,
not.
right? But the interesting thing is they've identified that we enjoy having, the ability to make all these choices, to multitask, whatever research they found, that was a really smart idea. I'm not saying that we have to be, the tire guy and the teeth cleaning people at the same time. Now, if you want to, great. The reality is like you said, leadership development and marketing are pretty, it's a business thing. There's a need, there's a gap. Those are things that we need to identify as we're looking at our business model as a potential. Like I said, for me, I found out early on that not all salespeople are good at selling.
Mhm.
Okay, so then I started to do some training on it. Well, I realized early on that my training didn't really fit for everybody, and then I realized it was a personality thing. And so I'm realizing that I have to, train different personalities differently. And
Mhm.
again, there's my two passions are starting to tie in, and it's really working out well, and I love doing that. So again, if you're thinking about your potential next step, and you have two ideas that are polar opposites, maybe teeth cleaning and doing the tires, just unpack it a little bit. It might come back, to Jennifer's point, and it might not. But again, I hate seeing people feel like they have to be so niched, and I don't think there's a right or wrong to it. So did you get anybody saying, oh my gosh, you have to pick one or the other? Have you had anybody push back on that, or have you not had that issue?
So I've actually had both. I've had people who are like, "Oh my gosh, that's brilliant! Like, I can't believe you thought of like,
Yeah,
yes, do that."
yeah,
And then I had other people who are like, "I really think you just need to pick one.
yeah,
Just pick
right?
one and really focus on it."
Yeah,
And so, um, it's interesting because the people who don't know me very well, were the ones who were like, "You really need to just cut it down." And the people who know me were like, "Yes,
yeah,
absolutely, go for it,
definitely.
brilliant, can't even, yes, for
Yeah,
100%."
yeah,
And so it is really unique to the individual. And I think there's a lot of merit to the argument of finding balance,
right.
balance in all things, right?
Yep, yep.
You shouldn't have a meal of Oreo cookies every single night. That's not good for you.
What?
But having, I
What?
know, sorry, newsflash,
But
right?
there's the reduced fat one, so I'm okay, right?
Sure, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely, 100%. No, but having Oreo cookies after dinner, like, yeah, great,
Yeah,
So it's about balance. We need
sure.
balance in our
Yep,
personal lives. We need balance in our professional life. Don't try to boil the ocean, right?
sure.
If there are everything, if you're excited about a ton of different things and you really like they're all really interesting to you, you need to ask yourself, can I build a business out of that?
Right,
If you have one or two things that really drive your passion, it's important to remain focused on those things and identify, can I build a business out of that?
sure.
You can't be all things to all people, right? So I know that the clients that I'm serving with leadership development may not be the same client that I serve with marketing support.
Yep,
Maybe they are.
yep,
But that's okay. If I were doing 85 different things, I
yep,
think that lack of focus would make me inefficient.
correct.
But I think having one thing to focus on can really diminish your ability to feel that sense of satisfaction. So I think it's about finding balance.
So can we change the name of your company to Jennifer Odd Consulting and Bait Shop? I mean, would that would be perfect, right? That's
I do really love to fish.
yeah, I
I
figured that.
do. I really do. And so again, no one would know that by looking at me.
See, there you go.
However,
Oh my gosh.
I don't know that I want to sell bait.
All right. Well, that's where I want to make sure, but from a serious perspective, if you're having polar opposite thoughts like that, don't discount the thoughts. There's still something there. And
Yep.
that's why, you have people like Jennifer and myself to be able to unpack that, for yourself. I've worked with plenty of people that want to start a business. They just don't know how. They have a great idea. That, oh my gosh, it's a killer idea, you know and I think there's three main parts to a business. There's the product and service that you sell, that's one. There's your
Mhm.
customer, that's two. And then there's the team, that's three. Those are the three primary focuses. I focus on the team and on the customer. Those are my focuses. You come to me with a great idea, whatever it is, and we're gonna make it happen. And I can't help you with the inventing of it necessarily. Probably not Jennifer, same thing. But I tell you what, you need it marketed. Holy cow, right? That's where you reach out to somebody like Jennifer, and she'll be able to really push that forward for you. And that's why we circle all the way back to imagine for a moment you're more successful than you dream possible. I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is all about. I mean, and again, you can stop your dream wherever you want. You don't need to make millions if that's not your dream. Maybe your dream is to help people and to watch lives, transition and change. So there's so much good stuff here. As we start to come in for a landing today, I want to ask, what would be Jennifer Ott's tip of the week for anyone that is listening today?
Oh boy. That's it's hard to zero in on one, but so I'm glad that we're editing this because I would say between you and I, don't be an asshole. Like
Okay,
just live life, not be an asshole.
there you go.
So that's between you and I.
Okay.
But um, my advice to anybody is be the person that you know you should be. Be the person your mom wanted you to be. Be the person that is the best version of what you imagine for yourself. And if you're not now, find a way to do it. Because if the last 18 months has taught us anything, it's that the world can change on a dime.
Yep.
And it's just too short to not have joy, and not joy at the expense of other people, not joy in the bad, but joy in the good, and in the
Sure.
good that you put out into the world and the good that you give to yourself. Um,
Awesome.
so that's the advice. Stop waiting. Just stop waiting.
That's so funny. Just jump. Yeah. Don't just stand there, do something, right?
Well, and if I mean to your point, for so many people, like we didn't just wake up one day with the skills and ability to start our own businesses, right? We looked into it, we researched it, we got help, we asked questions, we did those things. And for the people who feel stuck, I don't know what to do next,
Yep.
ask for help.
Yep.
Pick up the phone, call Dave, call me,
Yep.
find us, find somebody who can help coach you into that place of joy.
Yep.
Um, because there is, why wait? Why wait?
Yeah.
I don't have the money, find the money.
Yep.
Or start as a side gig, side
Yep.
hustle.
Yep.
I don't have the time. Of course you do. Of course you do. You have the time. There's time. If you have time to work out, if you have time to read a book, if you have time to watch TV, you
Right.
have time.
Yeah.
There should be nothing that holds you back from joy.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. So one last question, and this is gonna, you got to put your thinking cap on for this one.
Uh-oh.
So what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
Oh boy. Um, what is one person? Oh, good. I'm glad you're editing this down so that, or you can just have this and have like the Jeopardy music on, like,
Yeah, we could do that too. That's fine. No.
gosh, what's one thing about me? Um, I, you know, it's so obviously, that like I'm not a shy person
Sure.
when it comes to speaking, when it comes to sharing
Sure.
information about myself. I guess one thing I shared with you already is that I'm a word nerd. Like I'm a
Okay.
big word nerd. Love words.
Yep.
Um, and that's not to say I don't love silence because I do. There's a lot of beauty in silence, but I love words. But people I think know that about me. What don't people know about me? Um, um, gosh, I'm on the
Wow.
spot.
I stumped the master. This is awesome.
Hmm. Um, I okay. Well, all right.
All right, here we
I
go.
don't know if people know this about me or not. I have zero artistic ability.
Okay.
I think that might be why I love words so much
Okay.
because words are my jam. Words are where I can get creative, but I have um I have no ability to draw.
Hmm.
I have no ability to sing, although in my head I am a fantastic singer. Um I right and my
Well,
husband would vehemently disagree with that.
don't you
But
sound good in the car by yourself? I
I
mean,
mean, right?
right? Yep.
In another life, I think I was a singer,
There
but
you
no, I
go.
have a terrible singing voice. I cannot draw. I have a sense of colors, right? So I can look at a creative design, and
Okay.
this comes from the branding part of my brain
Sure.
that I can really pick that out and stuff. But no, I we had a poster contest in grade school that my sister still gives me the business about because of
Wow.
mine was so awful.
He beat you, huh?
Oh, it was
It was ugly.
yes,
Well,
yes.
Jennifer, this has been so much fun. So if somebody's listening and this sparked something in you, it's up to you to make the decision what the next step is. I'm not going to knock on your door and say, "Hey, what did you ever do with that information that you learned from Jennifer that day?" You know what? If there's something that's like gnawing at you, you want to learn more, you have questions, reach out to Jennifer. So, what, Jennifer, is the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to learn more?
Well, they can always come to my website, which is really hard to remember. It's jenniferoddconsulting.com.
I figured with all your word nerd, you'd have something other than that.
Right? No, real easy. jenniferottconsulting.com. You can email me through that. And so that's a great way to reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Jennifer Crivello Ott. Crivello is my maiden name. But I would say those are the best ways to reach me. I'd say call me, but if I don't recognize a phone number, sometimes I
Isn't
might
that
not
cool?
grab you.
Yeah,
Or if I'm in a meeting, I might not grab your call.
absolutely.
So
Yep.
email is perfect.
Awesome. Well, I got to say, this is the first chief SaaS officer that I've ever had the honor of hanging out with. Thank you
Yay!
so much for your insight. I took a bunch of notes like I always do. And again, I want to end with while we started, just imagine for a moment. And rather than me filling that in, why don't you fill that in as you're just kind of noodling on what just happened? And again, I encourage you, call, email, whatever. Do something so that you don't have that gnawing feeling. And I rarely, if ever, have seen somebody go, "Oh my gosh, that was so dumb for me to make that call." You're going to feel so much better. So again, thank you so much, Jennifer, for hanging out with us today. And we're both from Milwaukee, so hopefully we'll be seeing each other. I'd love to share a stage with you if you ever are if you ever need somebody to fill a chair. I would be honored to be that person. So
Same right back at you. This has been an absolute pleasure. I
awesome.
would I would love to find a way for us to collaborate again and be wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, and we'll be in touch soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much.